The 19th century had no forensic laboratories, no DNA analysis, no surveillance cameras, no national criminal registry. It had a continent of space to hide in, and some families knew exactly how to use it. 3 families, 3 crimes, 3 of the most sinister and meticulously documented cases in 19th century American history. Each one a different kind of darkness. Each one a different answer to the same question. What happens when violence takes root inside the one institution every civilization has treated as sacred? Tonight, we open 3 cases the 1800s tried to close and couldn't. In the spring of 1871, a family of 4 arrived in Labette County, Kansas, and established a small inn and general store on the Great Osage Trail, one of the few stopping points on a stretch of frontier road where travelers had no other option for food or shelter. They called themselves the Benders. Pa Bender, large, sullen, spoke almost no English. Ma Bender, cold-eyed and commanding. John Bender Jr., regarded locally as simple and amiable, and their daughter, Kate Bender, 24 years old, striking in appearance, who gave public lectures on spiritualism and advertised herself as a healer. Kate was the public face of the family. Investigators later concluded she was also its architect.
The inn was a single room divided by a canvas wagon curtain. Travelers sat at the table on one side. What they could not see was the family member positioned behind it. A sudden, catastrophic blow to the back of the skull. A trapdoor beneath the table. The cellar. Their throats were cut. Their bodies were carried to the orchard after dark and buried in shallow graves. Between 1871 and March 1873, at least 11 people were murdered at the Bender Inn. A United States mail carrier, a Methodist minister, an 18-month-old girl. When Colonel Alexander York arrived to investigate his brother's disappearance, Kate Bender received him with complete composure, offered him coffee, and suggested his brother might have passed through some weeks prior. He left the inn alive. He returned 3 weeks later with a search party. The Benders were gone.
This office has determined that the bodies of 11 individuals were recovered from the Bender property. All exhibit evidence of blunt force trauma to the posterior cranium and subsequent throat laceration. The property has been abandoned. The whereabouts of the 4 individuals are unknown. A reward of $2,000 is offered. The cellar walls were dark with dried blood. The Benders vanished into the frontier. Multiple sightings were reported across the following decades: Texas, Michigan, Canada, none confirmed. Kate Bender, the healer and lecturer, was never identified again under that name. The case remains open. It is documented in the Kansas State Historical Society as America's first confirmed family of serial killers. On the morning of September 11th, 1857, the Fancher Baker wagon train, 120 men, women, and children from Arkansas, had been under siege for 5 days in Mountain Meadows Valley, Utah Territory. Their water was running low. Their livestock had been driven off. Several of their number were already dead. When a detachment of men approached under a white flag, carrying a written guarantee of safe conduct, the travelers accepted it. They had no other option. The terms were simple: lay down your weapons and walk with us. The men went first. The women and children followed, each escorted, moving across the open meadow. Then, on a signal, every escort turned on the person beside them. The attack lasted minutes. Of the 120 travelers who had entered Utah Territory in August, 17 survived. All were children under the age of 8, deemed too young to remember or testify. They were distributed among local families and recovered by federal authorities nearly 2 years later. The evidence establishes that the Fancher party, after being induced to surrender their arms on the assurance of safe conduct, was deliberately and systematically attacked and killed by members of the territorial militia. The number of dead is confirmed at 120. The number of those charged? 1.
20 years passed. John D. Lee, the militia officer who had carried the white flag himself, was executed by firing squad on March 23, 1877, at Mountain Meadows, at the site of the massacre, at his own request. Every other participant died without charge. The full chain of command that ordered the massacre has never been formally established in a court of law. One execution for 120 murders in 20 years. At approximately 10:45 on the morning of August 4th, 1892, in a respectable house on 2nd Street in Fall River, Massachusetts, a 32-year-old woman named Lizzie Borden called to the family maid and said someone had killed her father. Andrew Borden, 70, one of the wealthiest men in Fall River, was found on the sitting room sofa. He had been struck 11 times with a sharp-edged implement while he slept. The coroner noted that the angle of the blows suggested the attacker had been standing directly above him. The body of Abby Borden, Andrew's second wife and Lizzie's stepmother, was found upstairs in the guest bedroom. She had been struck 19 times. The medical examiner established that Abby had been killed approximately 90 minutes before Andrew, which meant she had been dead in the upstairs room while Lizzie had been moving around the house below her for the better part of 2 hours. Lizzie Borden was the only other person in the house. The maid had been washing windows outside. No one had seen anyone enter or leave. The doors had been bolted from the inside. That same morning, Lizzie had told a neighbor she had a feeling something terrible was about to happen. The previous day, she had attempted to purchase prussic acid from a local drugstore and had been refused. She was arrested 5 days after the murders. Multiple wounds consistent with a hatchet or similar implement found on both victims. No weapon recovered. No entry point from outside identified. The household maid was washing exterior windows at the time of the attack. The deceased's daughter, Lizzie Andrew Borden, age 32, was the only other individual present on the property.
The trial opened on June 5th, 1893. It ran 13 days. The jury deliberated for 1 hour and 12 minutes. Not guilty on all counts. Lizzie Borden inherited the estate. She purchased the large house on the hill, the fashionable side of Fall River she had always been kept from by her father's well-documented frugality. She lived there until her death in 1927. She gave no interviews. She made no statements. The case was never officially solved. The identity of the person who struck Andrew and Abby Borden a combined 30 times in their own home on a Tuesday morning in August has never been established in a court of law. The Benders vanished because the frontier let them. The Mountain Meadows killers walked free because the territory's political structure made prosecution nearly impossible, and the institution that ordered the massacre was more powerful than the law attempting to reach it. Lizzie Borden was acquitted because no jury in 1893 Massachusetts could bring itself to convict a church-going woman of patricide on circumstantial evidence, however precisely that evidence pointed in a single direction. 3 crimes, 3 different failures of justice, and 3 cases the 19th century documented in sufficient detail that, more than 100 years later, we can still sit with the weight of what happened and ask whether the truth was ever really in doubt at all. 131 victims across 3 cases, 1 execution, 0 convictions in 2 of the 3. And the record, as it always does, remains.